Now at this time I'd like to introduce our speaker for this evening. Camille Rich is a personal friend and a fellow nature buddy. And I think it's very appropriate that she is our presenter on this Earth Day evening. Because one, she loves the earth, especially the piece of endangered Tamaulipan thorn scrub on the red sands of the South Texas sand sheet, which she named El Mesteño Ranch and Arboretum. Two, she's a steward of the earth, as you can see on her videos on Facebook, where she walks down the senderos of El Mesteño and explains which native plants are flourishing and what the benefits are. And she's limiting those senderos to only foot traffic in an effort to provide habitat for the endangered ocelot. Okay. The other thing is that Camille shares her passions with us. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce the bee that she's going to be talking about this evening, but it's one that she found May 21st at El Mesteño. And now it's been found at the Seal Ranch at Cat Trailers. And so it's really exciting to learn about this. So with all of that, let's welcome Camille Rich.
So yes, thank you for sharing your evening with me, and it is Earth Day, and the sand sheet soils look a lot like the reddish tones on this floor here underneath our feet. And in case you want to get your hands in some dirt, I did bring some red sandy soil in the back and some interpretive bookmarks I made in honor of Earth Day. The red is supposed to symbolize the red soil that is red earth. But anyway, I get into some rabbit holes, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. So yes, thank you for coming here and sharing your evening with me. And I know many of you, I haven't seen you in about a year, and it's just really good to see y'all. I'm back with my people. My BFF even came. I haven't seen her in maybe like 16 months. And she even came to surprise me, so it's ultra special. So if you know me, you also know I love mason jars. So here's the little bee in a mason jar on shrubby blue sage. Oh, and let me just say also that I just thought it'd be fun to have door prizes, so it's not a big deal, but if you didn't get a ticket in the back, I just have some, I'm trying to ditch plastic, I have some other containers for water and such if you want to participate. So in meeting fellow master naturalists, I sometimes cross paths with some interesting, important people, and I always say that I like to be around people that are smarter than I am and have done way cooler things, and I can like slingshot my knowledge a little bit fast forward by just hoping some of that pixie dust will rub off on me. So one of those scenarios kind of happened in 2021 actually. I met some interesting people in 2020, and then I set about boots on the ground looking for just interesting bees. And I kept seeing a really large bee that I knew was not a carpenter bee because I've been growing up with those and having those in my own yard for like the last 30 years. So I knew what it wasn't, and I just kept an eye on it. And I made little mason jars with screen netting, waiting for the rare bees that I would find and sending out the bat signal and all this to the universe that I wanted rare bees. That would be so cool. So a year later, boots on the ground again with some very interesting, learned people, caught a bee that was the bee I had been seeing all this time that everybody was trying to convince me was a good old-fashioned carpenter bee, and I'm like, I told you it's not. And so that person was really excited the day we found it, and we were practically falling over ourselves walking up the 12 acres to go into the ranch cabin so we could transfer it into a container, which guess what had been waiting for it the whole year? Its own little mason jar. So I actually snapped this picture with my cell phone in 2021, and you can see these big green fuzzy eyes. So one of my friends, her daughter also made some little representations of these bees. So the green eyes is very important. And I'm here tonight with my teacher hat back on. I want to if some of y'all want to go out and look for this bee, I want to do my very best with everything that I have seen and have learned and experienced to try to help you go and find this bee. Nothing would make me happier. So this is a Mesoxaea texana. Now, I think by all measures, this is a very handsome bee. So, and I like to give things nicknames, terms of endearment. So I've actually given this bee about 3 different nicknames. One of them was El Guapo, which means very handsome, which I love that one the best. And then when I found out how rare they are, I started calling them flying ocelots because they're kind of rare. They are occurring maybe in the very southern part of the United States where we're at, because we're in close proximity to the river, and northern Mexico, which is where they're more at than here. But they have been documented in Texas. And then the other one, and now I'm just calling him MT. MT, you know. So there's 3 nicknames. And this is a female. She's lovely. She has beautiful, shiny black eyes. And she also has some cute little hairs on her body, which I love saying, scopal hairs. We're going to talk about those too. So when bees are flying around really fast, it's hard to see things. So what I've done is train my eye to narrow in on certain characteristics to try to tease out what it could and couldn't be when they're flying around, either in the area or if I see them on a plant. So the characteristics that we're going to talk about are those. And then, oh my goodness, I did need a sign from the universe. And in 2023, I had a kind of a bad experience. And I just needed something uplifting. I needed a sign that this bee, literally this bee, was something I needed to try to continue to document because it was so rare. Not many people have access just to even keep a journal on it. And so I was walking down the senderos, as I'm literally like this, talking to myself, walking through the trails, making videos, and something's flying about this high, and I'm the only time I'm like, you know what, I'm tired of carrying my gun, my camera, my cell phone, my shovel, my back is hurting, I'm just gonna walk. So I'm walking about 6 acres in, and I'm like, what's that? Oh my gosh! And I was like, I don't have my camera. So they alighted on shrubby blue sage. I ran in steel toe boots 6 acres back to the truck. I drug everything back. My good camera, my cell phone, and I was like, okay, here's my sign. This is pretty spectacular. Now, all of you guys that are into bugs and insects and birds, you know that all the parts matter. If it has this, if it doesn't have that, if the dots are there, if the wing is like this, if it has the feet, all the blah, blah, blah. Well, bees are no different, and they're super small. And I'm not going to say that I know any more about any native bees, but I'm making it my business to know everything I can about this bee, to collect as much as I can about it, information. But tonight, my goals are to inform you, to maybe train you to whatever level you want to learn, and to entertain you. I want you to have fun and laugh, and I want to be silly, or why do it? Me, I'm a retired educator. Mesteño Ranch, I did work on getting that trademarked, and I do keep a website. With all these irons in the fire, nothing is happening in real time like I would like it, but I do keep it updated the best that I can, and when we get towards the end of the presentation, I'll share some links or some information on that with you. But here's a drone view of what it looks like over the ranch. This was about 2 years ago, and one of the things, at being Earth Day, you know, I love this red sandy soil, but I'll never forget the day where I was making the rounds on this little senderito, and I came around it this way, cruising around. I got here, and it was like in a movie. I just pictured Stanley's steam shovel and where's the backhoe, and I literally dropped to my knees and I cried because overnight about 300 acres, well, from 1 week to the next, 300 acres had been cleared. But we are going to talk about soil because this bee does like sandy soils. So I'm always trying to look at the positive. Now this contrast is a little bit too popped, but when it's rained and the sand can look that red. But the skies, I think, are just so incredible. So this is the type of habitat we're talking about. And I have to say just a little bit about the sand sheet, the South Texas sand sheet, or I would be remiss. So it is a sheet of Aeolian sand blown inward from the Gulf of Mexico during the Holocene epoch, which I think we are in the Holocene epoch. But anyway, it was formed in the last 8,000 years. And this area has gone by a few other names, Llano Mesteño or Wild Horse Desert. And in the early 1800s, it was reported there were 1 million wild horses out in the sand sheet. So just a little bit about the area we're talking about. And one last drone shot, a little bit lower, and there's a little watering hole here. The shadows, this was late in the afternoon, but you can see the red sand jutting up through the Tamaulipan thorn scrub. And I always say, you know people by their hashtags, right? So here are some, when I'm posting, here's what I'm focusing on. The South Texas sand sheet, Tamaulipan thorn scrub, endangered habitat, Mesoxaea texana, ground nesting bee, passion project, nature is my classroom, and nature stories, because that's just kind of how I think about all of this. Oh wait, that's not the bee. I couldn't resist. This is one of the ranch ambassadors, Chiclito, in his bee costume that Aunt Kat gave him a few years ago. And he's been identified way before May of 2021. I'm being silly. So going back, here's El Guapo, here's MT, here's the flying ocelot in the mason jar. Now here's the teacher part, so we'll get into the distinguishing characteristics. And I have to stop for a minute. And how am I gonna do this with only 2 hands and 1 microphone? Okay, so my other BFF, her daughter, oh my God, she's a crocheting savant. She taught herself how to crochet in the pandemic, and I commissioned a version of Mr. El Guapo and his bride, and even down to the little white hairs, the identifying parts that we're gonna talk about in this. So the eyes are obviously the eyes. I am having to learn all these terms myself, and the more I say them, the more they stick through repetition. And the thorax is this little fuzzy part. And all my non-scientific descriptions, I would say this is like their little fuzzy mink coat, which is not appropriate. Their faux fur right here. This is their little, over their shoulders, and then their abdomen is their little tummy part, okay? And their size also matters because they're a fairly large bee, and we'll talk about that as well. And then the scopal hairs, those are the little white hairs on the body, some towards the tip of the abdomen. They both have them on the tip of the abdomen, but the female has the little hairs on both sides of her sternum as well. And so these are the things we're gonna be looking at. And then their behavior, because they're really kind of cool. And no, I've never been stung yet. So we have Devin, who is going to be here with us tonight, because Devin came out with Maki and Kat last year. And you know, so much about watching this bee, my brain flips around to all these movies I've seen. And suddenly, when I looked at El Guapo, see, here's the eyes. The eyes, the thorax, you see where we're going with this? And the abdomen and the scopal hairs, okay? Yay! So the eyes have it. And when Devin and Maki and Kat and I were looking at it, I suddenly pictured Tom Cruise in Top Gun. I'm like, oh my God, he's wearing aviators. They're green aviators. So just when you're looking at this bee, we're gonna talk about the eyes, how the eyes converge or tip inward at the top. The eyes are not straight. They're tipping inward like green aviators. And that's one of the things, because there's big bees with green eyes and they're not all the Mesoxaea texana. But the eyes are one of the first things that I look at. And here we can see that the female's eyes, it's hard to take pictures of these bees. So this is the best one I could find out of maybe 2,000 pictures I'd taken that kind of show the female's eyes are very dark and more upright. They're not tilting in at the top, okay? And then in the first year that I found the Mesoxaea was found and identified. I actually found one. He just died. I found him out on the trail. And I just want to point out that even here you can see how the eyes are tipping inward at the top, but also just point out that the difference between being alive with bright green eyes and when they pass away, the eyes kind of don't hold that same color. I didn't really know that until I started trying to learn about bees. So when you see a lot of bees in collections and so forth, you don't get an appreciation for what their eye color might have been because they're deceased, they're expired. And yes, size matters. So I was like, here we go again. I taught 5th and 6th grade, right? Devin, oh my God, thank you so much for that. So I taught 6th grade, okay? So I'm like, and if you've never seen a carpenter bee, you don't need to see a carpenter bee. You just need to know that these bees would fit almost inside of a quarter. So you're not looking at a tiny, tiny insect flying. You're looking at a pretty big object. So the males are from, they're a little bit smaller. They range from 17 millimeters to 20 millimeters, and a female can be as big as a quarter in length. So it's a fairly large bee. If you know what carpenter bees are, or even bumblebees, they're that big. That's the size you're looking for. And the scopal hairs, I love them. The female has white hairs on the tip of her abdomen, which she also has this really cool built-in little shovel called a pygidial plate that helps her dig tunnels and so forth when she's making her chambers going down for her nest. So we're looking at the little white hairs on the tip of the abdomen and on the sides. So when they're zipping around, the scopal hairs is a distinguishing characteristic between this bee and another and their cousin, or whatever they are in relation in the same family, that's also a rare bee but does not have those white hairs. Okay, so when they're zooming around, I'm like, did it have white hairs? Did it not have white hairs? Were the eyes in? Were they out? You know, these are the things that I'm looking for when they're zooming around. And here's the male. He had his head buried in a Watheria indica, which is, they went to town on this plant this year, and we'll get to the interesting plant part of this. Just when you think you have them figured out, and if you go onto INAT, you can see that their diet seems to be kind of broad. Just when I thought I had them pegged for shrubby blue sage only and whitebrush, then they go and change it up on me and pretty much only want to be on Watheria indica all last year, which is kind of cool. It's just part of my journal, just noting what's happening. And they're territorial, not only towards members of their own species, but also towards other flying insects and even humans. And so I've seen them, they buzzed me, and Kat, do you want to pretend to be, you pretend to be walking down a sendero, and I'm learning that this territoriality display happens in other bees, because I'm seeing another bee do it to me at the ranch right now. But this bee, it does this really cool hovering act, and its wings are going so fast it has like this stroboscopic effect, and it's maneuvering like a helicopter, or I should say a helicopter. Somebody engineered a helicopter after watching bees, just like they made the sunglasses after looking at bees. So it would just be me walking, and all of a sudden this bee would go, and I'm like, what was that? And then it's just looking at me, and it's hovering and hovering, and then it might go like this and come back at me, and it's just hovering and hovering, and yeah, and I'm getting closer and closer. Or another, dragonflies are overhead 8 or 9 feet, and it'll be like zooming them off. They'll be like having aerial battles up high in the air or low in the air. And so the territoriality thing is kind of fun. And here's Kat and I last year. And here's the bee. It's looking at us. And all my videos have my finger pointing in it because the sun is so bright. And it's zoomed over here. So it just kind of darts around and flits around. And I've trimmed all these videos. But MT does have his own playlist on my YouTube channel now, so y'all can see him. And I did see the coolest thing. I watched him buzz a Texas tortoise like for 4 minutes. And you can see him. He came and looped around to me. And now you can see his shadow on the sand, but that's the other thing. It's hard to see. Where did he go? Here he is. And he just when I saw this happening, it had literally buzzed right on top of the tortoise. And one of the things that I'm learning about when I read is that when they're being territorial, you're in their area, but it's their area because maybe there are nests there, and I've also noticed that the males come out first and they're waiting for the females to emerge. So I don't know if they're staking out their territory or that was their territory last year, and when they emerge, they just kind of hang out. These are all the things that I'm hoping I'll find out. And they do this really cool hovering behavior, and here, they will hover a couple of feet to upwards of 8 to 9 feet above a spot. And here's a male. You can see the green eyes, but you see those little telltale scopal hairs. So cute. Not as cute as Devin's skirt, but they're cute. And here is a good video. This one's about 6 or 7 feet off the ground, and I'm about 7, 8 feet away. And it's just kind of like, this is my area. It's just kind of staying in place. And every once in a while, it might zoom out just a few feet. And they kind of like mark a spot and say it's mine. And oh my goodness, last year I didn't know, I don't watch movies anymore. I didn't know there's movies named with the name of bee NATO, but I actually saw a bee NATO a couple of times, and I wasn't fast on the draw with my camera, but I'm gonna put this down for a second. And then I've since found out that this is something hummingbirds do and maybe butterflies do. I don't know, because I don't know that much about insects. So I'm gonna use my 6th grade teacher voice. So I was watching Shrubby Blue Sage with my camera and trying to take pictures, and I saw they were 2 males, and I just saw one getting closer and closer and closer, and then all of a sudden it wasn't cool. They locked together, and I heard their abdomens click. They hit so hard, and they're spinning. There's all this buzzing, and they're spinning. They're locked together, and they're spinning like a tornado, and they drop down about 6 inches in the plant, and then they break away and they fly off, and I'm like, no way. So then I'm waiting and waiting. They never do it again. So then I start working again, and then they do it, and I didn't have my camera. And then Kat saw them do the same thing. So this territory, I just thought it was really cool. It'd be something that I think some people might think would be cool to see. So I'm going to try to capture a bee NATO on record somehow. It's a goal. And these are also ground nesting bees. I think, I don't want to say that I don't really care about honeybees, but what native bees need are ground, open bare ground, leaves. Their nest requirements are very different, and we'll talk about that a little bit also. And I haven't documented one. I'm trying. Last year, the girls and we found 2 nests that are about the same size of what I can read about in the literature, but there's not a picture of a Mesoxaea texana nest. Y'all can Google this. I would love for you to. There's not much written about these. There's a nest site recounted from a long, long time ago that describes thousands of them in a location. And I've read a lot of what you read about this bee. They'll say refer back to its family member, the Mesoxaea gloriosa, because they're in the same family. So it's like Mesoxaea texana, Protaxia. So I'm looking and reading about this related bee in the hopes that maybe some things might be parallel as I'm sleuthing around to try to find a nest site. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but here's one of the bees, and they've been found near where the bee has been historically documented for several years now. So yes, I had to get a ruler. It's pretty big. It's about 4.5 or 5 inches, give or take, by 4.5 or 5 inches. And the center hole, like my thumb could have fit in it. And it was about nickel size in diameter. It was a big, and of course I put it in iNat, and it came up with about 30 insects it could be. So I'm like, whatever, I had to try, whatever. Yes, I set a trail camera up on it too. And I got several videos which weren't as cool as this roadrunner getting that insect, but it's a bucket list item to capture a nest. But what I can show you are examples of other native bee nests out in open, bare ground. And they're very cool. Some of them look like little volcanoes. And this is the bird's eye view looking over it, and this is about the size of a pencil in diameter. And then some look like little turrets. And I came upon the most elaborate one just the other day. I had to go get my ruler again, and it was almost 4 inches tall. And it was so intricate. Each one of these lumpy looking things was like a separate tube that were all like masterfully glued together with some substance. And at the very end, the sun was not kind to my images, but at the very end of this, there was a perfect little hole to go down in there. It was just the coolest thing. And then, of course, the reproduction incident. And so in 2023, for the first time ever, I observed those. And I was huffing and puffing, and I was like, I was trying to not breathe so loudly in my videos, and by the time I got out my good camera, I wasn't breathing so hard because the microphone was picking up everything. And you know how when you run and then and so I got some really good video of the two of them making more, which is described and written, but when I saw this, I was hopeful that they had decided to pick the ranch as a place to have nest sites, because of course I'm all about, making more, just protecting the habitat, hopefully increasing the population so that they can spread. Even had ideas of maybe moving some to neighboring ranches and trying to build up the population, right? I'm going to be a human being and I'm going to go in and mess with Mother Nature. But no, I've decided not to do that, except to really be very strict about protecting the habitat and increasing every possible square inch of a plant that I know that they use. And my life really did change that day. And in that moment, I was like, dang it, I don't want to do this. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a lot of work. There's going to be challenges. I'm going to be challenged. But it's my responsibility to be in the natural world, and to y'all, to anybody that cares about it, to try to document just in layperson's terms what I'm seeing, for everybody or anybody to read, that eventually I'll publish it in some format. I don't know. Right now, I'm just happy collecting data because I like details. But I'm keeping a record. And I saw Lisa Adams' beautiful phenology wheel maybe over a year ago now, because I haven't been here all year. And I said, that's it. I need to keep a phenology journal. I need to keep it. It cycles. It's like my grandpa keeping track of rain over by the electric meter and the kilowatts used. I've got to keep a record. And so I upped my game. And so my whole passion for this is a fluid subject. As I learn, I went to some online trainings by Xerxes during the pandemic, and I'm like, ground temps, I've got to take ground temps. So I pulled out my infrared thermometer and I made a spreadsheet of monitored sites. I'm keeping track of whenever I go to the ranch, my arrival time, my departure time. The short version of where I'm finding my data is timeanddate.com, but I want something that there's longevity to the data and I can go back for years and find. But humidity, barometric pressure, temperature, what were the skies like? Because in walking around looking for this bee, I know that when it's cloudy, they're not out. And when the sun comes out, poof, they're out. So I have learned some very general principles. And so I may never use any of this, but I think it's important to write it down for right now and keep it, so I'm keeping track of it. I also keep track of things that are not necessarily a ranch visit, like when NOAA or NIDIS or NIDIS. I'm keeping track of drought levels with everybody else's data, not mine. And then I do old school, keep my own rain gauge. And I keep a running list of plants blooming, what's not blooming, what's about to bloom, because again, looking for cycles in how all this may or may not overlap. And this was really cool because on this day, a really big famous bee, insect person in the whole world confirmed that the male and female Mesoxaea picture that I put up there was actually a male and female Mesoxaea. So I kind of know what they look like, guys. And that's why, you know. And here is my spreadsheet. The wonderful thing is I started out with 2 control sites because there's no water out there. I have well water, so I have to drag a hose and all kinds of stuff. And I mean, I've hurt myself. My feet are worn out. I mean, it's exhausting. But I was watering 2 control sites, one in full shade, partial shade and one in full sun, and I was watering shrubby blue sage as a control. And then they were there one year, and then they decided they didn't want to be there anymore. Then they moved somewhere else, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So as they're moving, my monitored sites increase, which is really good. And last year they kind of blew me away because I added a 9th monitored site in a place that's maybe 5 times the size of this classroom, but that was just loaded with a Watheria indica. And it was, I was like, am I on horseback counting cattle again, like the good old days? Because I was just counting 5, 10, 15 at any given time, and I'd leave and go do a chore, and I'd come back in these windows of time I'm going to talk about, and there'd be 2, 4, 7, 9. The numbers were so high. I was like, whatever's happening, it's great. Then I'm seeing that the numbers were increasing. And like I was saying, this is a fluid document. As I learn from people and things, I incorporate what I believe to be new relevant data points into it. I want somebody to benefit from it at some point. So like I was saying, ground temps, NOAA, NIDIS, rain, humidity, barometric pressure, skies, wind, plant material blooming, anything on INAT, and so forth. I've kind of started to add in just some anecdotal stuff because I try to make it interesting. So if like when there's hurricanes and I'm not out there, I'll add data for like the days before and after when we've had winter storms. I'll try to beef up that because at some point I do want to make charts and graphs. But teaching others is important. And why? Well, there's some really cool books that I have for y'all to look at, but in general, there's really not a lot known about it or recorded about it. And it's my teacher's heart. The more people know what to look for, the odds go up that maybe more people can find it in more places. And wouldn't that be really cool? So are you thinking you might want to go look for the bee? So where would you even look for the bee? Where has it been found recently? So, Mesoxaea texana have been found on the South Texas sand sheet at El Mesteño Ranch and Arboretum and in the pollinator garden at Falcon State Park. And so Falcon is a very sandy, silty soil, but lots of open, bare ground areas. And as you saw the drone shot over my little place, I may not have a lot of sandy open spots on my place, but there are acres and acres around me that are. So I cannot definitively say they're living at my, they're living there, but they're coming there from somewhere. And so I'm just trying to protect what's there and make sure they have plant material. But if you want to go sleuthing, right, you can jump into iNaturalist and see where the bee has been seen. And I liked this too because I was like, hey, they were on clammy weed in northern Mexico. That's really cool. So you can kind of see, then someone found one over in North Cameron County. And I forget the name of this plant, but it's really cool because I even read reports in some of the stuff I was looking that this bee was found in Dallas back in the day. So, I mean, I was like, whoa, okay, it's possible. And so does soil type matter? If you're going to go hunting for something, if you're going to go hunting for the bee, I do think soil type does matter. There does need to be spaces of open ground. And if you read in some of the literature, it will say verbatim red sandy soils. So that would be a good first place to start. And then Falcon is not red, but it's sandy and very silty. So, but what native plants does this bee use for nectar and pollen? And that's why we're here tonight, to tie in the native plant part of it. So I'm going to say you can find a lot of things written about it, but I'm just going to focus on what I've seen with my own eyes. So the Salvia bellata, I'm not even going to try to say these names, Ken. I just can't do it. I can't do it tonight. The shrubby blue sage, and in my journal, this is coded SBS, shrubby blue sage. And it's in the mint family. And if I even just walk by you can smell this very pungent aroma from the leaves. And when you crush the leaves or bruise the leaves, it's even more pungent. But you can see the very bright blue flower. And this was what they were going to town on. This is what the bee was found on to begin with. Can y'all get a little whiff of that smell? And if you walk by and if it touches your clothes, it's kind of like it's just naturally, it's very aromatic. So, oh goodness, what did I do here? Oh. So this was like the main one. If you were going to go hunting, I would say find some SBS, find shrubby blue sage. Then I would say second best, which I actually saw the bee in September of 2020 on whitebrush, and I didn't know that was the bee until about a year and a half later. But whitebrush, the leaves don't smell like that, and this one's kind of drying up, but you can see how it's a white creamy flower, and I say that it's kind of like a spike or a bloom spike, like a plume. It kind of grows in that shape. And if you crush the leaves on this one, I'm sure it does have a smell, but it's not quite as pungent as the whitebrush. I really need to just keep this in my hand. And then this is cool. So walking again, recording. And I found this bee zooming around on Texas kidneywood, it's in the Fabiaceae family, which is documented. The family's documented, but this plant is not documented. So that's cool. And that's just me rambling. It was a female. So the kidneywood and the whitebrush look a lot alike. And this is where the first time I met Ken was in my Texas Master Naturalist training, and he was such a good teacher. He brought all these plant samples there, and I took all these pictures so I could learn. And then I upped my game. I'm going to have to put this down. I'm going back to my teacher voice. So to me, when I was first looking, I thought, you know what, the kidneywood to me looks a lot like a whitebrush. So one of the distinguishing characteristics is that the kidneywood is very, very pungent. It almost reminds me of a burned rubber or a tire smell, but it's very, very pungent. But the fragrance of the flower is equally, it's incredible. And the kidneywood, all of this is blooming currently, thanks to the rain, because when we got that big rainstorm the other day, I got 12 inches of rain out there. And so I'm hoping to get a little bit more rain to carry the blooms forward, because we're going to talk about. I'm sorry. Don't behave. You're front row shows. So if you touch the leaves on this, and I'll have these out there if you want to do this later. If you can pass it around, that's fine. So the leaf smell is how I distinguish those two. That was my point with all of that. And here's a not very good close-up of the blooms. And here's the cool part. So they're changing on me, and that's wonderful. They keep me guessing. So there's some new plants that they were on, and one of them is called the Cynanchum barbidrum, or the thicket thread vine, or the aphid vine. And here's El Guapo. And I was like, dude, I'm watering the shrubby blue sage for you. In fact, the sprinkler's going in this video. And I'm like, did you make a mistake? What are you doing? That's not shrubby blue sage. And I was like, you know what? Maybe he wants that. So I stepped back and I watched him for a while. And I zoom out. And he goes back and he selects that flower again. I'm like, he likes this vine. That's cool. And it's in the milkweed family. So he purposely nectared on that for a few times, and I was like, oh, that's new. I was like, that's cool. And so here's the little flowers are so tiny, and when pollinated, they make these really cool seed pods that go to seed and look like that and are carried on the wind. So that was new. I was excited about that. And then this is documented in iNaturalist, but this was documented locally last year at Kat's Place in San Ysidro, Texas. So that's really exciting. And this Watheria indica really surprised me. And so that's when I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm not killing myself watering plants for you guys anymore. You changed your game on me. And so This plant is really beautiful. And I do have actually some that are blooming. They just started blooming in the last week, and I do have some seeds if y'all want to take them. Everything is for free. They loved this plant. Everywhere and I was so thankful because this plant came up in such abundance. There was a few years there that I worried because we had severe drought. That is why I began to water these control sites, because in 2022 I only saw 2 bees out of the whole time I was looking for them, which we'll talk about. So does time of day matter? Yes, it kind of does. So I'm going to give you what I've figured out from the School of Hard Knocks as a starting point. So after scouting and observing the bees, so if you're hunting for something, you go look to see where you think it might be living. So go find areas of open, bare ground with sandy soil. Look for some of the plants that we can see either here or on iNaturalist where it has been found. And then get on location. And it's hard for me to get up early anymore, guys. Get on location and just start conducting your surveys between 8:30 and 9, because I've seen them as early as 8 in the morning and the sun really wasn't up. And then sometimes it's been like 10:30 and I'm like, okay, where are you guys? And I'm, by survey, I mean I'm walking in a 12-acre patch over acres. And I'm walking to one site and I'm watching for a while, and then I'm walking to another site and I'm watching for a while, and then I'm walking to another site, and I'm doing this in cycles of 9, and then I'm doing a ranch chore, and then I'm doing the cycles again, maybe in a different order. Maybe I saw more over here. So it's all just very random and intermittent. But then they kind of go away for a little while, but then they can come back in the afternoon. In fact, when MT was first found, it was late. Well, for me, it was late. It was 4 p.m. in the afternoon. The metadata on my cell phone pic says it was 4:04, and we had caught it about 20 minutes before. So it was still really hot, but it came back out. So that's just a suggestion. And does time of year matter? Yes, and we're almost to the time where I've been seeing him. So this is perfect timing for y'all. The cycles have been in May, June, and July. Last year, I saw my first male bee on May 26th. This is all stuff I just recorded in my journal. And the last bee was also a male that I saw on July 2nd, and it ended its cycle and it stayed its whole cycle on the shrubby blue sage in that part of the year. And then I was just walking around, minding my own business, thinking I was going to have to wait a whole nother year to see this bee. And who do I see? I see El Guapo. I'm like, is that you? Oh my goodness. He was back. And then I think, oh, you know what? When I first saw this bee in 2020, it was in September. So I'm like, well, within my own small data set, this is possible. I'm a dreamer. It's possible. It's him. So yes. And he and the female came out a little bit later, and they stayed predominantly on Watheria indica. Not until almost towards the end of the cycle, it's like they kind of got bored with that. Then that's when I saw them on kidney wood, and that's when then they went back in the end to the shrubby blue sage and the climbing milkweed discovery. So teaching others has already started to pay off, because in September it was found at a second South Texas sand sheet location. And so Kat had been at my place and watched it, and then she found it at her place. So I want to give you a mini little field trip to the Sea Ranch in San Ysidro, Texas, the second location where we found this bee. So here's the Sea Ranch, and that's Kat's family. And here's a gorgeous Texas tortoise. And you can also note the red sandy soil. Beautiful wildflowers, and these are tens, if not 100 pipevine swallowtails roosting. I don't remember the name of the tree that it was on, or which tree it was. Mexican ash tree. But here is the Mesoxaea actually on the climbing milkweed at Kat's place. And here's a picture I took of the female. And here's another. And so it's on a fence line with two big open bare patches of land on either side. And it's in buffalo grass and different native grasses, so I didn't really see any big open areas of bare ground, but I mean, that's cool. It's somewhere. And it hung out here for about a week. I think Kat saw it for about a week. So that was very exciting. And so that was your little field trip to the CL Ranch. And you can help all native bees by doing some things y'all are probably already doing. I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir a bit, but you can help create nest sites, reduce the use of pesticides, and just share the good news of native bees. And I know what some of y'all are thinking, because I was a traditional yard person. That's how I was groomed and trained as a child. And at some point, I shifted gears and left all that stuff in my yard, but took a 360 in another direction. But it doesn't have to look crazy, and it doesn't have to look like a brush pile. And so I've tried to incorporate some little things into my yard. It may or may not give you ideas. But here's the cool home for the carpenter bees I've been watching for years. It's a big dead piece of Esperanza. But dried branches, stacked dried stems, sticks, piles of leaves, maybe dead wood, or even just leaving some open areas of bare ground. And this is my cedar fence, where when I trim brush or little plants, I'll stack the sticks up against the fence line, so I'm not tripping over them, but I'm creating a potential nest site. And sometimes I'll put these little sticks like this, or like 2 years ago, well, spring before last, I had like sunflower heaven in my backyard. So all those, they got to be 10 feet tall. So when they dried out, I kind of removed them and stacked them all up here as a potential nest site. This is a little bit bigger site. It's not really, bees could use it, but it's also for lizards and things to get away from the neighborhood cats and stuff that I can't control that. And this was some wood for my chimenea I never used, so hopefully there's some bees in there now. And here I kind of step back. You can kind of see the beauty of stacking branches and stuff is that they decompose and they'll turn back into soil, so you can keep adding your little sticks and branches there and just keep that little pile going for a long time. And this was part of my traditional landscape. I drug thousands of pounds of limestone back from my sister's place in the hill country and made a cute little rock wall in the front yard. And I had creeping fig growing on it, and so I just left it there because it's just more nooks and crannies. But now the carpet grass is gone, and I have a lot of other native plants in there, and I let my leaves just stay there to create also potential nesting sites. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. The pictures I'm showing you right now are in my backyard in town. I live in town. It would be hard to say. I know lots of people are looking for them in obvious places like Quinta Mazatlan, the Butterfly Center, and I've happened upon some really cool personal private pollinator habitats in downtown McAllen. If not the rare bee, I think we have lots of cool native bees. A native bee will find it, and any native bee would be good to help. And so if you would like to be part of this journey with me, this is my other ranch ambassador, my senior horse, my handsome horse, King, or Snoopito that I call him. I do try to keep a few things current. So I do have a ranch website, mesteñoranch.com. And I do have a YouTube channel because I love trail cameras. And through the years I've been doing this, since like 2013. I have been able to record some awesome things, but now the Mesoxaea texana has their own playlist too. Because part of all of this, I'll be honest with you, when we come across something, I think sometimes my nature has been, oh, this is so cool, maybe I should just keep this to myself for a little while, or maybe I should get more data, or maybe people are going to challenge me, or they're not going to believe what I'm seeing. But then I thought, no, I'm learning. I'm a student of a lot of people and things, learning about this bee. And I was like, I think that's a little too selfish. And what if I die before I publish a paper I say I'm going to publish, And so this playlist is me sharing with whoever in the world is curious about this bee, actually my silly videos, boots on the ground in Puerto Rico, Texas. And that's what the website is. And the Facebook page, Mesteño Ranch and Arboretum. And I just haven't caught on to Instagram, but I got one anyway. Oops. There, I talked too long. So here are some of the resources, and I'm going to put the microphone down, and I'm going to hold up some books here in a second. And they're in alphabetical order, but I will say this is to hold myself accountable, because I also have a novel that I've written, and I'm still editing. But I have entitled my phenology journal, A Day in the Life of a Mesoxaea Texana on the South Texas Sand Sheet, my phenology journal. Like, that's too many words. But anyway, I've been doing, and as I've learned, I go back and add to and I'm printing stuff, and I'm saving newspaper articles, and it's like a grand old school research paper. So let me grab a few books real quick, and that are mentioned in here. And that's really it. So hang on a second. So of course, I have to mention plants of deep South Texas. And I haven't used it at all. At all. I don't know. I think there's some still available here at the Nature Center, because I actually bought some about a month ago. And if not, they're pretty hard to find. If you have one, hang on to it. The other book I really love is by Michael Eason. It's called Wildflowers of Texas. I love this book. I got to meet him and hear him autograph my book here a few years ago. And I really like this because I like visuals. So this is color-coded by flower color on the spine. It's kind of cool. And then fairly recently, a photographic guide to the vegetation of the South Texas Sand Sheet by Dexter Peacock and Forrest Smith, a private landowner and a biologist, I believe. They put together a cool little repository of information on plants in the sand sheet. And 2 bee books. The Bees in Your Backyard, which I just have, this book is all I had for the longest time. And I have so many post-it notes I don't remember. Okay, so in this whole book, there's 3 paragraphs written on this bee. 3 little tiny paragraphs. And they mostly say, go back and check out this other bee in the same family. Okay. So that's when I'm like, oh, I have to start keeping a record. This is a really, really cool book to have. I know some of y'all. And this is hot off the press. This is Native Bees of the Lower Rio Grande Valley, a photographic guide by Paula Shaw. And this has a really cool section about the flying ocelot. I even looked at it so much I already wrote in the book. I think I'm going to have it written out. El Guapo is in the Andrinidate family. So look at those eyes, right? You can really see how they tip inward or converge at the top. That's the correct way to say that. It goes into quite a lot of detail. I love this on all the different body parts. The wings, they're so beautiful when you can see them. Part of them are transparent, so when you're watching them, you can kind of see the sky through their wings, and they taper off to this really pretty black. And you can see their little fuzzy wing coat that they're wearing in their eyes. They're a very, very striking bee. And so this book is an excellent resource because it takes a lot of what's been written about this bee, and the resources are just phenomenal. There's so much in here. This will become it's irreplaceable already. It's just fantastic. So if you don't have this book, you should also get that book. And that's really kind of all I have to say. I don't even know what time it is because I'm not wearing my watch. Did I talk to him? Thank you.
an Amazon, for sure,
Okay.
Amazon, and it's published, I'm sorry, by Texas A&M University Press. But I know it's on Amazon, yeah, Texas A&M University Press. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the features, I mean, some of the things you should have.
Where did she take her picture of the?
That is actually, that picture is the Mason Jar picture. That is El Guapo. El Guapo numero uno. El Guapo the first. Yeah, that was him when we caught him that day. You know, I've been through a lot, and I don't know where I got it, because my dad was such a taskmaster and such a perfectionist, and so I have a really good work ethic, and I'm very detail oriented. But I don't know how I latched onto a bee to fall in love with. But I just love this bee, and it's, you know, it's just become something that I'm curious about. Just like I want to really, my brother and my dad, I have to tell you about the ocelot. And so my brother and my dad actually saw an ocelot in our family case, like it'd be like 25 or 30 years ago now. And I know other people that live in the area that have seen them. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility, but I am a dreamer. And lately, as I get older, I'm a big believer in saying it out loud, and working hard for it, and holding myself accountable. And that's what I'm doing with the bee, is just trying to document. And I retired writing like 150-page technical reports for a caseload of like 100 kids every year. I have a finance degree, so the fact that I'm very detail-oriented, I think helps me try to pick up on all the subtle nuances, and I try to learn from people that know more than me, so that I can maybe incorporate that, because I have the privilege to be walking around with it. So I'm just trying to throw a really big net and catch as much data as I can that might be helpful. Just looking at cycles, times of years, and I'm really hunting for the bee nest. I would really like to document that and take some good pictures of it. But unless I actually saw it making the nest, I could never say it was a nest. So I might have to employ trail cameras and all kinds of stuff. So that's the fun part. Yes, ma'am.
Is there anything known about its historic range, or there's just not enough information?
There is
about
a
it?
lot known about it, and I don't even have it memorized, but for example, I'm going to read from page 21. This is a reference to a person named T.D.A. Cockle, who that's a pretty big name, and it's described by T.D.A. Cockle as, quote, a large and beautiful insect, end quote. And then it goes into all of the characteristic features. Let me find, there's something I want to read. Let me see if it's here. I want to read you an accounting of a nest site. Hold on a second. It goes into range, associated plants. There was a gentleman, and because it talks about a little further north in Texas, I want to say it was in the coastal area around Corpus. Ernest, do you remember by chance that description where I think it was the preacher and his son said, Dad, come, there's all these, like thousands of these bee nests and all these bees flying. And I don't know if it was 100 years ago. You know the one I'm talking about, right? The range is principally in Mexico. Let me grab that bees in your backyard book. Is that okay? I don't know. I think it's written here. They reference. Okay, here we go. Sorry. These bees. Let me get the mic. This is kind of cool, and I'll leave you with this. I know it's in Paula's book. I just can't find it.
So these bees often nest in large aggregations of several thousand individuals. Each female builds and maintains her own nest, often in close proximity to other females. In Texas, in 1932, the Reverend Berkman observed an incredibly large aggregation and wrote an account for the local newspaper, The Getting News. The article read in part as follows. My son, with whom I am now staying, tells me that he has seen a lot of bees or wasps in the air, and they are making a great ado and hubbub, flying in all directions, and not only over a small area, but for quite a distance the noise is heard, and the ground is full of newly dug holes. Next morning, when the day grows warm, we go out, and I find all this to be true, and not the half told. I could not see the insects on account of my poor eyesight, but my son tells me all I want to know. He tells me the bees are flying, some of them only a half a foot from the ground, others much higher so as to get over the weeds. Still others are pretty high up, all of them flying fast and like so many little furies, making all the noise possible to them. You could hear them at some distance, and the sound was similar to that heard in the telegraph wires at times, but much louder. And to listen to them for a while would make me a little nervous. So I don't know if I need a hazmat when I go to find this bee, if I'm going to get stung. I don't know. But I'm sorry. Let me go back to this. So I don't know. I would just, I have been able to traipse around some in Cameron and Willacy County. I never saw the bee there, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And it would be really cool to find it in other places. And so if you don't want to go out looking for it on purpose, if you just remember the green aviator glasses and the little white hairs, you might actually see it somewhere. I mean, it's possible. It's possible. So with that, I just say also Happy Earth Day. And, oh yeah, I brought some containers for a raffle, but that's it, I guess. And please, when we turn the lights on and it's over, I brought all kinds of stuff to share, and it's all free. If you're not interested, but you see something that a family member would like, or your nieces, nephews, your children, or whatever, please feel free to take it, okay? Thank you.